Hi, everyone. This is Lindsay, and welcome to Oh My Scars, a podcast educating you on the everyday life of living with a disability. In the last episode, I introduced myself, and today I figured I would bring it back to the beginning of it all. So I brought my mom, Tina, on today to answer some questions about me from when I was a kid. Hi, Mama. Thank you for joining me today.
I'm so glad to be here, honey. Glad you asked me.
Oh, absolutely. So I prepared from some general questions about being my mom as well as being a mom of a disabled child.
All right, go ahead.
All right. Well, the first question that I have for you is how old were you when you had me?
I was 34. I had two children, your brother and sister, from my previous marriage. And then when Daddy and I got married, we celebrated 4 anniversaries and decided that we wanted to bring another child into our lives. And so that would be you.
Well, I thank you for that.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
All right. And is there any evidence to show that your age had anything to do with my disability at all?
No, and that's a frequent question. No, there is no evidence that my age had anything to do with it. It's arthrogryposis is a viral disease, and it happens to you in utero. So no, my age didn't have anything to do with it. As a matter of fact, when you were in the hospital for your first surgery, you were a year old, the social worker that had worked with us throughout your first year came and asked me if I would go speak to a family who just had a little girl born with arthrogryposis, and the mom was 20.
Okay.
So there's age is not related.
Okay. All right. And so while you were pregnant with me, was there any indication that anything was wrong or that I had a disability or anything like that, like with ultrasounds or anything like that?
No, I didn't have any ultrasounds. They weren't as common then. And I was never asked, actually. I was never asked if I wanted one, so I never opted into one.
Okay.
So the pregnancy actually was the best of the three, and it was easy right up until the labor.
Okay. Well, as far as your pregnancy being easy, you're welcome. I'm here to serve.
Anytime.
And what was your labor like? I've heard stories, but
yes. Well, the labor was not quite as easy as the pregnancy was, particularly at the end of the labor, because they discovered that was then, at that time, they discovered that you weren't coming into the birth canal like you should. They still had no idea why, but you weren't coming into the birth canal. So that we went to the operating room for the birth, and the doctor, I believe, had some indication that you couldn't bend your legs. Your legs weren't up against your body in a fetal position.
Okay.
They were straight. So he had some indication of that, and he had a nurse apply what he called fundal pressure, which felt like my ribs were crushing, actually, where the nurse got up and with her forearms kind of pushed you in the direction that you were supposed to go. In doing that, I got a cracked rib, which was a whole lot of fun. Please don't say thank you for that.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
But the labor was, the delivery was the difficult part. The labor was long, but they always are usually. But the birth part of it was difficult because the doctor at that point didn't know what he was dealing with. Finally, when you finally popped your little head out, you were purple, and he was a little concerned about that. And then he had a little difficulty pulling the rest of you out. But when he pulled the rest of you out, a lot of times the doctors will lift the baby up to show the mom. He ducked you down so I couldn't see you, and they took you right off to the little area where they cleaned you up and everything. And the next thing I know, Daddy is being called over there, and I heard the doctor say, "Daddy, we have a problem."
Oh, well, that's nice. It could have been a little bit more subtle about it.
Yeah, they really aren't in the subtlety business, unfortunately. And I felt like, chopped liver at that point, because everybody abandoned me, and they're over there, and I'm watching and I'm not seeing anything. And then finally, after about 10 minutes, Daddy came over and he told me that you had clubbed feet. That's what he told me. And that's what they told him. And he kind of thought that your shoulders didn't look quite right, but he'd never seen a newborn baby. So he had no idea, and he was just going by what they said. Well, I had heard that clubbed feet could be fixed. So I said, okay. And I always have that thought that, well, everything can be fixed. Mm-hmm. So I said, all right, okay. And he said, but she's beautiful. And, she came out blowing bubbles and, all of these things. And so we more or less focused at that moment. We focused on you being born, and we have our baby girl. We didn't know ahead of time that you were going to be a girl. We had named you ahead of time. In both cases, you were going to be a David if you were a boy. But it wasn't until the next day when they came in and told me that, well, all the tests that we've done, she's fine. And I said, well, that's nice. That's great. That's good news. I didn't know that there was a possibility that might not happen.
Yeah.
And then they said that they were going to have a doctor from Children's Hospital come over and talk to us.
Oh, well, that's, encouraging.
Yeah, that was the first indication that maybe, it was about the clubbed feet, maybe so. My cracked rib kind of kept me a little hyper focused on myself at that point. It hurt, and but then we had a lot of visitors. A lot of visitors came. Daddy's two sisters were there, and my best friend, your auntie, and a few people from Daddy's work. They were all there, and this big, tall doctor comes walking in the room. And he said his name, and he said, well, I've examined your daughter, and every indication is that she has something called arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. And that was a huge mouthful for such a little bitty baby. And then he unfortunately didn't ask everyone to leave. And by the time I remember thinking that he was unloading his load of bricks. Every brick was, she'll never brush her teeth, she'll never brush her hair, she'll never eat by herself, she'll never walk, she'll have multiple surgeries, but she'll be above average in intelligence.
And which I can do all of those things.
Yes.
The surgeries happened, but I can do all of the other things.
And you proved every single one of them wrong.
Yep.
So that's, in a nutshell, that's what happened.
Okay. All right. And just to move on from the baby, or not the baby part, but the being born part, when did I start sleeping through the night?
Bless your little heart. You were 3 weeks old.
3 weeks.
And I woke up one morning to get your sister off to school, and you had not been awake all night long. I went to your little bed, which was in our room, to make sure you were all right, and you were just all sleeping and having a grand old sleep for yourself. And I go, all right, Mama. And it wasn't a fluke.
No, it wasn't a spotty thing?
It was not. You continued to sleep all night long, and I just Thank you.
You're welcome. I wonder why in that aspect that was so different than other babies.
I don't know. I've always looked at it like a little philosophical thing where somewhere in your young little mind, you knew that what was ahead as far as, your therapies and all of those kinds of things that were so different from your brother and sister. So you kind of just said, okay, let me give this little gift to mom and dad. And, 'cause in those 3 weeks, daddy, even though he was working, he got up in the middle of the night to take a shift in feeding you. So he shared in everything equally. And so when we have this conversation about I did this and I did that, I did stuff for you because he was working, but he was very much a part of everything that went on. But yeah, that was a great gift.
Well, you're welcome.
My rib healed quite nicely.
Yes, you look fine now.
Thank you.
Okay, and in your opinion, do I look more like you or like Daddy?
Oh, hands down, you look like your dad. There's no doubt about it. When his sisters first came, he had twin sisters, and when his sisters first came to the hospital to see you, one of them, they were twins, so Nanny, we called her Nanny. Nanny came in the room and she was laughing, and she said, I didn't even have to ask nurses which one was Lindsay, because I could look at her and see she was her dad's baby all over. So yes, definitely Dad. You don't look a thing like me.
Oh, was there anything specific about the way that I looked that looks more like Daddy? I've heard my cheeks.
Yes, your cheeks, his eyes.
Yeah.
You've always lamented the fact that you didn't have my blue eyes, but you had his brown eyes. You definitely had his smile, which I think is the most beautiful smile in the world.
Thank you.
You just looked like him.
Okay. All right. And what has been the hardest thing about being my mom?
Yeah. I think that the hardest thing is with every child, we have our expectations and we have our dreams for our kids. And when you were little and I knew what your future looked like, at least in the short term, meaning surgeries and therapies and, those kinds of things, and the fact that arthrogryposis can't be fixed. That was the hardest thing, I think, because whenever something happens to your child, you go into fix-it mode.
Right.
We have a phrase around the house. What do you remember the phrase around the house? What did we always say?
Daddy fix it.
Daddy fix it. This was something Daddy couldn't fix. This was something Mama couldn't fix. This was something that the doctors couldn't fix.
Right. So
that alone was the most difficult thing to wrap my head around. And as you got older, into your middle school, grade school, middle school years, it was difficult for me to let go. You'd been home with me where I could protect you. You were in my little protective bubble. And I don't believe in cosseting children. I believe that the best thing to do for children is to allow them to live under supervision, obviously, but allow them to spread their wings and to see what, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but to see what they can and can't do in life, right, and that kind of thing. But I knew that you'd have limitations. And so the hardest thing, I think, was knowing that you had limitations that your brother and sister didn't have. Little did I know that those limitations would actually be okay, and that we all aren't ballerinas or firemen.
Yeah.
But within our own little worlds, we're what we need to be.
Okay. All right. And what do you find most rewarding about being my mom?
Well, it's the same thing that I find rewarding about being a mom to your brother and sister. It's when you bring children into the world. My job as a parent is to make you independent people, show you the way to be able to live your life as a productive person, which you do in spades, and to make you prepared for the real world, not this utopian kind of thing. The world is a difficult place to live, and as a parent, it was my job and Dad's job to teach you that, to show you. Not, I'm a writer, so not everything is telling but showing. So we show the different difficulties that we have in life. If we had a money problem, we never hid that from you. If we had, if a pipe broke in the house, we never hid that kind of stuff from you.
It's really hard to hide that.
Well, but life has difficulties. It's not all, let's have, ice cream and cake and everything's wonderful. If there's a problem, we did what we called circle the wagons. And we as a family dealt with anything that happened to come. Nothing got in. Nothing hurt us. Nothing made us less strong than we were, because we were all of us together and we all worked together.
Yep, very true. All right, and what do you think was the most surprising thing that you discovered about being my mom in particular?
My strength. And I say that because, without going into too much, to that point, I never really had much of a self-esteem. Daddy helped me a lot with that, but I never did have much of a self-esteem. And I didn't know that I could face all that we all had to face in the light of your disability. There was a lot of times when my focus had to be on you, whether you were in the hospital, which you were for the first 7 years of your life. You were in and out of the hospital, not because you were ill, but because of surgeries and that kind of thing. Arthrogryposis doesn't come equipped with an illness as such.
Right.
So, but you were in and out of the hospital for various surgeries the first 7 years of your life, and that took a lot of time away from Chris and Kim at home. Thank goodness for your late grandmother, who really filled in. She really stepped in, and she helped fill in those spaces when I couldn't be home. But I think that I kind of had to just pull back my shoulders and say, we're going to plow through this, because it wasn't a time to crumble. So I like Daryl Dixon on The Walking Dead, I picked up my crossbow and I went to war against arthrogryposis, and anything that got in my way, unfortunately, didn't survive too well. School boards and things like that. I kind of went to battle for you a lot in that regard. But yeah, it has to be my strength.
Okay. All right, good. And you are a very strong person. You and Daddy together have done an excellent job.
Well, thank you. We're a team.
Yes,
we've
definitely.
always said that we're a team.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay, and what is your best memory that you have that involves me? Well, with something that I did maybe that was like funny or cute or, inspirational or, something.
Well, all of the above. You were a funny little girl, and on a talking situation like this, I can't even begin to explain what just came in my head. because you had some facial expressions that just were amazing. Your brother taught you one where you kind of like an Elvis kind of snarl kind of thing that just you could do that by the time you were 2, and he thought that was funny. But the one thing that comes to mind that was a particularly wonderful memory that I think if I forgot everything else in my life, this one memory I would never forget. You had surgery on your hands because your fingers on one hand were bent down in your palm. Your listeners can think of the American Sign Language sign for I love you. And as a matter of fact, one of my friends told me she'll forever tell you that she loves you by the position of her hand, of her fingers. But the doctor and the other wrist was bent at the wrist. It bent down. So in order for you to walk, you needed to have your hands positioned in a proper way so that you could grasp a walker. So he had done the surgery on your wrist to bring your wrist up into the right position, and he had fixed the 2 fingers on your right hand to where they were up where they should be. And we had been at this particular day, we had been at Children's Hospital, and I'm talking to the therapist. We hadn't been there in a while because of you're recovering from your surgery. So she and I were kind of catching up, and you had a walker. You had confiscated a walker from one of the ones in physical therapy. And we look up to ask you a question. Now you were like 4. We look up to ask you a question, and you're on the other side of the room.
I just ran away.
And now you had braces on, but you were standing there holding the walker, and the only conclusion that we could come to was that you had walked over there, although we did not see it. And you were tired, you didn't want to walk back. So okay, so we get home. Your dad was still at work, and your brother and sister had gotten home from school. So we're in the living room, and I've got to show off or get you to show off. So we're all in the living room, and you walk in, and we're all jumping and carrying on because you've walked through the kitchen, the dining room, into the living room, and we're all excited. And then Daddy drives down the driveway. So I put you in the kitchen, and the 3 of us are in the living room. And you're just standing there holding the walker that they let us bring home that day. And you're just standing there. And then Daddy comes in the door, and I tell him, okay, just stand right there and watch. And, well, I go back. You were in the living room. I positioned you in the living room. Mm-hmm. And I told Daddy, stand right there by the door. And he did. And you walked through the living room, through the dining room, and into the kitchen. By the time you got to him in the kitchen, he was on his knees in tears. And I will never forget that. And you never stopped. I've got to say, you never stopped walking.
No.
And that's a memory that will always stay with me.
That's awesome.
You are awesome.
Well, thank you. Okay, and what habit of mine makes you most proud of me?
Oh, your perseverance and your independence. You are the most determined human being that I've ever met in my entire life. You have accomplished so much just by saying, I'm going to do it. You would get off the school bus in the evening and you say, can't talk, Mom, got to go do my homework. And I never had to say, Lynn, do your homework, none of that, because that was your job and you knew what your job was. Mm-hmm. But then when you went out on your own, you went to college and lived in the dorm, and then you got a job and you're just, I want to be you when I grow up.
Well, thank you. Okay, and do you and I share any similarities, either physical or, personality wise, or both, or anything?
I think personality, we're twinsies in personality. We both love books.
Oh, yes.
We talk books a lot. We love movies, and we love the same kind of movies and television shows. You always are recommending television shows for me to watch, getting me hooked,
Yes.
keeping me away from my desk.
Yes.
My next book's coming, people, I promise. And we love to laugh, and we
Yes.
do that a lot in our house.
Yes, we do.
A lot. And I don't know if we I've never thought about whether we resembled each other. We've got dark hair. Well, I had dark hair at one time. I don't know that we resemble each other physically, but personality wise, I
the
think
same skin
we're
tone.
we got the same skin tone. We're buddies. We're just really close buddies.
Yeah, we are. We're very, very close.
Yes. You're one of my very best friends.
Besties.
Besties. BFFs. Yes. Definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, that is all of the general questions that I have.
Okay.
But now I would like to move on to questions of how it was raising a child with a disability.
Okay.
And I would like everyone to please keep in mind that these answers are very real and honest, and to not think anything or I would think anything negative about the answers. So just, keep in mind that these are just very real feelings. And most parents will have these sort of feelings, even if they don't say it.
True.
So, now also as a reminder, my disability is called arthrogryposis, or, a longer way of saying it is arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. I just prefer arthrogryposis, or you can call it AMC if you want to.
Right.
So that is what we'll be talking about as far as my disability goes. So we already really discussed when and how you discovered that I had arthrogryposis. So I think that that's good. What was your initial thought, and how long did it take you to embrace your new normal? So when you were told that I had arthrogryposis, and not like, oh, she has club feet when I was born or anything like that, but the diagnosis of arthrogryposis, what was your initial thought, and how long did it take you to say, okay, and not where you were kind of like, I guess, I hate to say wishy-washy about how you felt about it, but when you finally embraced that, okay, this is my new normal, this is life now.
Okay. There's a long answer to this. When you have the expectation of a child being born into your family, you have the preconceived notion. And I remember telling Daddy, who had no children prior to this, that, the morning that you walk into the baby's room and the baby's standing up and got her arms, or his or her arms out to hug you and say, oh my goodness, that's the best thing. And there wasn't a day in your childhood that you were going to pull yourself up in your bed. That wasn't going to happen. And that became obvious right away. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be very honest about this. When the doctor told us what the situation was, as I described earlier, after everybody left the room, and it was just Daddy and I, we both cried. And the main thought that we had was, how in the world are we going to pay for everything that she needs? A couple of years after you were born, your doctor had told me that the expenses that were picked up by our insurance and by the Handicapped Children's Program that I believe, if I'm correct, it doesn't exist anymore, but it did exist at that time. The expenses could be with surgeries and braces and lifts for your shoes that you needed and walkers and crutches and all of these different things. It could amount to $250,000 a year.
Oh, man.
So, Daddy made a good salary as a CPA, but that wasn't in the budget.
That's a lot of money.
So we did have that very real, very frightening expectation of what happens. She's in the hospital now, but eventually they're going to release her and we're going to go home, and what's going to happen? So we had that. And I remember kind of being dazed. Just all of this, like we say now, information overload. It was a lot of information in a very short period of time. And then not all the information. So I was laying in the bed, and Daddy had gone down to the nursery to see you. And you were in the NICU, but they let him in and they masked him all up and everything. And they let him in, but they let him have you. And he came back in your room, in our room, because he stayed on the floor, on the little pallet on the floor, because I got a private room. And he came in the room, and he had you all bundled up in a blanket, and he lifted you up till your little face touched his face. And he looked at me and he goes, "Gotta get it together, Mom, because we need you." And it was at that moment, looking at that precious little face, I said, "I'm ready. I'm good." So it was actually probably about an hour or two after the doctor left that, I said, okay, it's not the way it was with Chris and Kim, but I want to see what it is. And so it was, and I never turned back. As you know, I never turned back.
No.
That was it.
My biggest advocate.
I tried.
Okay, and were there ever times after you embraced your new normal that you got frustrated and wish I was able-bodied to make your life easier? Not for my life, but for your life?
No.
Okay.
Never.
I think that sort of that falls into the line of what you just said about how you never turn back.
Yes.
So.
No, I always wished for you that you were able-bodied, but I never thought, that never occurred to me for my benefit. No.
Okay. All right. And how much did you have to change your parenting style from how you raised my siblings to how you raised me, since I was born last out of the three of us?
I don't think I changed my parenting style. I took Chris to football. I took Kim to dancing school, and I took you to therapy. So, I don't think I changed my parenting style so much. I was always one that, you clean your room. And you had a severe case of the dropsies.
Yeah.
You dropped everything on the floor. And I, like I did with Chris and Kim, I said, "Little chick, this isn't going to fly." So we got what we call the hand reacher, and that became your extended arms, and it allowed you to, it's the long thing, it's the little thing grippies. You can, grippy things that you can pick things up off the floor. And you did. And one little funny story that just shows you how normally we tried to raise you. You went to spend the night with your good friend Jennifer, and her mom was one of my closest friends. And Jennifer's mom called me up laughing. And I said, "What's going on now?" And you were about 2, and it was dinner time. And it was time to clean Jennifer's room so that you could go eat dinner. And so Pam said, okay, Jennifer, you clean up the floor, and Lindsay, you clean up the bed. And so Pam laughed and she says, and Lindsay's not stupid. She just swept everything onto the floor. And she says, but I couldn't let her win. So I picked her up, I sat her on the floor, and she picked up all the crayons and put them away. And that pretty much, that I sat you on the floor quite a few times and you pick things up. And no, I don't think my parenting style, I think I kind of honed it over the years, but I don't think it changed.
Okay. All right. And about my surgeries, is it accurate to say that I had one surgery every year from like 1 year old and up?
Yes.
Okay. So I've had 7 surgeries in my life.
Right.
And they were on various parts of me. My arms, my legs, mostly. That's it. My arms and my feet, my hands.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell me about one that well, we know about my hand. I had surgery on my hand, on both my hands, and
right.
One of them didn't, what I like to call, stick, I guess.
Right.
It didn't last. My hand reverted back to its original form.
Right.
But my wrist did not.
Right.
My wrist stayed the way it's supposed to, so I didn't have, the inward
right
anymore. So my arms look relatively normal as far as being in the right direction.
Right.
It's just that I can't bend them.
Right.
So my right hand makes the eternal ASL I love you sign.
Right.
Whereas my left hand I can hold out straight. And so I know that's one of them. And then with my legs, I know that I have like pins in my legs, or
you had club feet. So what they did was they pinned your ankles at a 90 degree.
Okay.
You can't bend your ankles at all.
Nope.
But they're pinned in place from the way I understand it. They showed me it comes in on either side of your ankle. There's crossing pins, so it holds your ankle. You had casts, and I remembered there was pins stuck out a little bit from the sides, and they trimmed them, and they did all of that good stuff when you had the surgery. But they pinned your ankles into 90 degree positions so that you could weight bear on your ankles. Mm-hmm. And then with your knees, they didn't operate, as far as I remember. Yeah, they did. They operated on your knees because one of your knees was hyperextended, and so at the knee, instead of being straight, it went off. It kind of veered off at the knee to the right, and so they had to straighten that out.
Okay.
It's arthrogryposis is muscle contractures. And so your knee bends very little, and I guess it bends a lot less now than it used to. But the whole purpose of the surgeries on your legs and on your ankles was so that you could weight bear in the hope that you would walk.
Which I do.
Which you do. You walked a lot more when you were younger.
Yeah.
But they did a lot, and we went through years of therapy so that you could walk, and you did it much earlier than that. Well, you slipped away and got sneaky about it.
Yeah, I got sneaky. Another thing that's interesting to point out is the way that my surgeries were done on my arms allowed me to feed myself, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I didn't have the surgeries.
That's right.
And that I use the aid of my left arm to prop up my right arm to do the majority of the tasks that I do on an everyday basis. And now I know that there was one surgery that I had, and I'm curious on your take on it, where they took out a piece of my chest muscle. Was that what it was? And put it into my arm to help me out with that?
Yes.
were you concerned, or was your concern debunked, or was there not a concern at all with the doctor that was going to affect the way that I look, the cosmetic aspect of me later on in life?
Yes, there was a cosmetic concern, and you had that surgery when you were 6, and it and I can't think of what the muscle is. It's the one that the guys all weight lift to build up their muscles in their chest.
Pectorals?
Pectoral, yes, that, thank you. And it was a surgery that happened to be on a television program, and a friend of mine saw it and called me and said that this little girl from Kentucky had this surgery in Louisville, and she had arthrogryposis. And I got a hold of the TV station, and they, I was able to see the report. And so we called the hospital where the doctor was based and made an appointment, and we drove to Louisville, Kentucky. We actually met the little girl and her family. I had arranged with the mom, and we spent an evening at their home, and their daughter was a little different than you. You have what is called classic arthrogryposis, where it affects all 4 of your limbs. It only affected her arms.
Okay.
And it's like anything else. Every patient's different. But she had the surgery, and she was able to you have a passive bend. She was able to actually bend like we bend.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I can't think of the word right now. But the idea was to hopefully to train your mind to bend your arm voluntarily. That didn't work, but it bends passively.
Right.
The cosmetic aspect of it came in where they took a pectoral muscle and threaded it through an incision in your upper arm, brought it down to just below your elbow, and attached it to the bone just below your elbow. And it was an amazing surgery. I really credit the doctor for being brave enough to even think about this. But when we went for the appointment, he said that there could be a deep scar in your chest, and that at 6 maybe that was acceptable for the situation, but to think ahead to your view of your body and that kind of thing. Well, the doctor in Kentucky contacted your doctor in New Orleans, and it was your doctor who performed the surgery, and he did such a beautiful job that you don't even have a scar in your chest at all.
No, there's no way that you could tell that anything happened. There's nothing going on there.
You had the only scar from that surgery is a little bitty scar right below your elbow crease. Mm-hmm. That's it. He was amazing and should have pioneered that surgery himself.
Yeah, I don't have any scars, so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I was going to say, and it didn't happen that way. I don't have any scars.
Not
there.
at all. Not at all.
Okay, and speaking of surgeries, when I would go into the OR, or when I would go before all of my various surgeries, as I mentioned, I had a lot of them. Did you cry when I went in?
The first time I did.
Oh.
The first time you were a year old. Mm-hmm. You were this little bitty, tiny, bubbly, smiling little beauty who had no hair and no teeth, obviously. And your daddy used to say you had pearly pinks. You say pearly whites mm-hmm. when you have teeth. Well, you didn't have teeth, so he said you had pearly pinks. Mm-hmm. And the first time you went in, you were on this huge gurney, and you were so tiny. and so cheerful. You were smiling. You were talking to babbling, but you were talking to the nurses. You had a personality on you from the time you were born. And I'm going, oh my God, my baby.
Yeah.
The surgeries after that, I was more goal oriented.
Yeah, like, okay, we're gonna get this done.
Right. You survived that first surgery, so we were good. And all that came after, because that was rough.
Yeah.
On you, and you came through that with, my God, you were amazing. You had braces, casts that had to be taken off every week, and that cast saw, the first time that cast saw scared the life out of you. After that, it was like, okay, get them off and we'll put the next one on. And that first year, 2 years, you had braces and casts on your arms and your legs. I have photographs of you with all of this equipment on you, and you'd sleep in all of this stuff, and you never stopped smiling. You never complained. As you got older, you never complained. You never cried. It never kept you from sleeping. But you went through a lot. It wasn't just surgery. You went through a lot, and a lot of it, particularly the therapy, was very painful for you.
Yeah. I don't really remember it too much, but I sort of remember doing physical therapy, but thankfully I don't remember the pain of it.
Well, Daddy used to call it wrenching your legs and arms off. So that gives you some idea. And my thought behind it was, I'm trying to keep the bend in your arm from your arm surgery, and I'm trying to keep the bend. And so we actually, as a family, we took shifts. Mm-hmm. So every 2 hours, one of us, including your grandmother, was giving you therapy up until bedtime, just to keep the bend in that arm. And that included your brother and sister and Daddy and me, and then your granny. And we would do it, and the whole time you're crying, I'm crying, because my job as a mom is to make the cries and the bobos go away, and I'm inflicting it. So that was a real hurtful thing. Everybody else they didn't want to hurt you, but they go, we're going to get this. We're going to get this. So it took me a little while to get on board with that part of it.
Yeah.
But once I did, I wrenched them off too.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you did.
Yes.
But I think that also attributed to, as an adult, having a high pain tolerance too.
You do, yes. You had one surgery where you refused. You were about 7. It was about your last surgery, and you were about 7, and you told the nurse that you didn't want that that sleepy medicine. And that surgery, you had absolutely no pain medication when you came home. None.
Wow, that's crazy.
Not even baby Tylenol. Nothing.
Huh. And so I'm pretty sure that since you were positive and, after that first or second surgery, that Daddy was pretty much the same way.
Daddy was he always had a positive attitude.
He's like that now.
Yeah, he is. He always said to me, plastic muscles, baby, plastic muscles.
All right. And, you said that I appeared to be okay. I do have a certain memory of surgeries. But that only extends as far as me laying on the gurney and getting ready to go into the surgery and, loving and kissing on you and Daddy before I went in there. And then the smell of the anesthesia mask. Oh, it was
like
terrible.
The strawberry one.
Yeah, I was going to say. And then they started doing it with the strawberry scent.
Yep.
And I was just telling Chris, my husband, that last night about that.
You said, give me the strawberry one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then at what age did I stop using my wheelchair full time?
Well, like we said before, you were a sneaky little one. You started walking after you had your surgery. It took a little while to build up to the walking, but you started walking when you were 6 years old. Mm-hmm. And other than if we had to go distances, or or if like we were shopping or something. And by that time you were the March of Dimes poster child for New Orleans. So we had a lot of events that we had to go to. So, you know, there were times when you had to, well, and you had an electric wheelchair too. So,
Yeah.
But in those cases you had to take your wheelchair. But it was when you started walking, it was like a switch turned on in you, and you got this confidence that you could do anything, and you did, and you fell a lot. And when she fell like a tree, because of the way her arms were. She couldn't protect herself. So we had broken arm, we had a broken nose, but nothing made you afraid. And you were about 6 when the full-time thing stopped, and the walking took over a good deal.
And how old was I during that time where I just left my walker in the kitchen and just went to my room without it because I didn't think I needed it anymore?
Well, you were probably going on maybe 8 by that time.
Okay.
And you had had it in your head that the braces got in the way and that you really wanted to walk like the other kids. You know, you didn't have a lot of problem in school as far as bullying and that kind of thing, but still you had maybe imposed by yourself, but you had the expectation of normalcy in somewhere in your head. And so you just came one day and you walked out of the living room with your walker, and I walked out in the kitchen a few minutes later, and the walker's in the kitchen and Lindsay's nowhere to be found. And I found you in your room, and you go, yeah, I could do that. That was pretty cool, huh? So, okay, the walker got put in the attic, and but then you got serious, and you asked me if you could go without your braces. Now, because of the muscle contracture in your right leg, you walked
with a limp.
With a limp.
Yeah.
A little like E.T., kind of side to side. And you swing that leg out a little bit for balance.
Is that what it looks like?
Yeah, really. It
Never
does.
watched myself.
Yeah. But you said, can I walk without my braces? You had a 3/4 inch lift on your right shoe. And I said, well, if that's what you want to do, then we need to talk to the doctor to make sure that that's okay. So when we went back to the doctor said, I don't see anything wrong with that. He took x-rays and he says, I don't see anything wrong with that. She's not going to do any more damage. Arthrogryposis is maybe a unique kind of disease in that the worst that you are is the day you're born. So the muscle loss is non-progressive. It's already done by the time you're born. So the doctor said, yeah, I don't see any problem with that. The other thing that we kept the lift on the shoe for a while. And then when you outgrew those shoes, we asked him if you could go without the lift. And he said the only problem is she going to be okay with the profound limp that she had? And you were fine with that. And so you were about 8 years old, and you were without braces, without walkers, without lifts. You were fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so in the vein of we're starting to grow up a little bit, starting to get a little bit older, we're progressing in my life.
Yeah.
Besides a ballerina and a firefighter, were there any other jobs or careers that I wanted as a kid that you knew were unrealistic for me?
Well, the day you told me that you wanted to be a ballerina, I went in my room and cried. Now, I've never been, and Dad has never been, a person who would say, well, you can't be a ballerina because you've got arthrogryposis. That just wasn't in me. So when I told your therapist at Children's that you wanted to be, for instance, the day that you decided to be a ballerina, she said, well, we better get working on your pirouette and all that. So, first off, we have to get you walking. Then when you wanted to be a fireman, your occupational therapist said, well, then we better get into these exercises so that you can lift that heavy hose. Mm-hmm. So they were wonderful in that.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Well, you always had a fascination with keyboards. Mm-hmm. And I just couldn't see how you were going to be able to do the keyboard thing.
You mean a musical keyboard?
No. Well, you pounded on Dad's keyboard.
Oh yeah, not well, but I did.
Oh, you had all kinds of unknown songs on that.
Yeah.
But no, a computer keyboard. Mm-hmm. But you that's our baby Fiona. She's okay. But you just had your own way of doing it, and so the keyboard was terrific, and you did become the writer that you wanted to be.
Yes, I did.
Yes, you did.
And I am one of the fastest typers of any one-handed typist I've ever met.
Yeah, yes, you are. You are the envy of all people who took typing in school and who can't do it two-handed. Yes, indeed.
Yes. Which I was not allowed to take, by the way, because
Right.
I couldn't type in the traditional manner.
Yeah.
With the two hands on the keyboard. But I can guarantee that I probably type faster than most of those kids in that class.
Yeah, I fought for you on that, but it didn't work.
Yeah, well, I'm better for it.
Yes, you are.
Okay, and so how did you feel about, or how did it make you feel when I moved out on my own for the first time? And I don't mean in college. I know that you've told me before that when I moved to my dorm room that you cried for 4 days. You
were in the gold chair in my bedroom.
Yeah,
Yes.
you were not excited about that. But when I moved to the apartment in Kenner, for instance, with Wendy,
Yeah.
that was my first apartment that I had that wasn't on campus. How did you feel about that? Even I was with someone at this point, so
Right.
she was there to make sure that if I fell, I had help getting up and all that. Did you feel okay about that?
At first, I was hesitant, as any parent would be, but I trusted that Wendy would take care of you. I knew her. I trusted her. Mm-hmm. I twisted her arm a lot. I bribed her to take really good care of you. And you came to our house a couple of nights a week and ate dinner, so that worked. No, I trusted that she was going to take care of you. So college was very difficult for me because I
was on my own.
You were on your own, and you were in that room, and like I said before, you were prone to falling. You would not, because you were clumsy, but if you found an uneven surface, you would fall. And so college was until you were in college maybe 6 months and there'd been no incidents at all. Then I kind of settled in and I go, okay, I can go pick her up and, bring her laundry home like other college kids come home, and, and then it was fine. But those first 4 days, I don't know that I ate. I'm not sure I ever got out of the gold chair in my bedroom. I cried for 4 days. I did. I'm not ashamed of that either.
Okay. And what is the biggest accomplishment that I've had that maybe you predict wouldn't happen for me because of my disability?
I think living a normal life. You've had a couple of different jobs. Mm-hmm. You're married. You're the best mama to a fur baby that anybody could ever imagine, our little baby Fiona. You are a super intelligent person, which I always knew that you were, but just that you never laid on your disability, and there would have been every reason for you to say, well, I could live at home with mom and dad and I don't have to take care of myself. But you you moved out of our home as other kids in the natural progression of their life do. You got out of college and you said, okay, I want to be on my own. And so just the fact that you embraced life as it was and didn't rail against the unfairness of your disability. Disabilities are unfair. There's no two ways around it. And people have asked me questions about being a mom of a child with a disability. And, would you change anything and all of this? And the one thing that I always say is that I prayed for our child to be born. I never made a bargain with God. Oh, please just give me a healthy child. I never made that bargain with God. He gave me the child that I was meant to have. Mm-hmm. And I have never, ever regretted the idea that I wanted a child. I've never regretted that. None of us have. You're the most perfect child for our family.
Thank you.
You are.
I'm blushing. Okay.
Pinky cheeks.
Do you think that you would have had another child if Kim or Chris had been disabled? Do you think that you would have had another child after them?
Chris is the firstborn.
Mm-hmm.
And I can honestly say that had he had a disability, I probably wouldn't have, because I was 20 years old when he was born. I was 24 when Kim was born. I'm not sure at that point, having had one and then, 4.5 years later had another child. I don't know. I honestly don't know if I can answer that question. Mm-hmm. Other than I always felt that you came at the perfect time as far as in birth order, because I had the others. Now, Chris was 14 when you were born, and Kim was 9, almost 10. So I had that behind me. They mm-hmm. were, well on their way. But the knowledge that I gained as a parent, as a woman, as a human being was so much more at 34 than it was at 20. Mm-hmm. And having met parents of children with disabilities and having, a first child at 20, that would probably not.
Yeah.
But you came at the perfect time. Let's say that.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I did. And besides wheelchairs and scooters, I know that we had to put a ramp on the house.
Yes.
And I know that when I was first beginning of the potty training stage, with the rails and stuff on the toilet and stuff like that, which I didn't end up using because my arms didn't allow me to. But besides those things, were there any other accommodations? Oh, I know that I had a
bath bench.
A bath bench, and I know that I had the bed that sat up.
Right.
But other than that, I can't think of anything else.
No, we had a normal looking home as far as that goes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, there were no bars because the bars wouldn't have done you any good. You couldn't grasp them. So.
Yeah. Okay, and it didn't go unnoticed that I was given the same rules and restrictions as my siblings, which I thank you for.
You're welcome.
But were there ever times that you wish that you had imposed a stricter regimen, if you will, I guess, for me because of my safety or anything like that?
I would have loved to have been able to keep you in a bubble, mm-hmm. To protect you, to always be with you. That's as impractical as it is with able-bodied children.
Right.
And so you kind of just suck it up, Buttercup, and me being Buttercup, and you just say, she is not going to be protected out in the world, so I need to just allow it to happen. So no, we didn't.
Okay. And that's really all the questions that I have. I just have a couple more things that I want to say. Now I know that when I was 13, we had a conversation, and basically the gist of that conversation was, look, you're 13 now. This is when you start giving your parents all kinds of grief. Don't do that. And all I said was okay, and I never did.
You never did.
That was basically the end of that. So
you were a parent's dream teenager.
Well, thank you. I say thank you a lot.
You do, but I love it.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, I mean, I'm a fawning mom, so you know, I with the three of you, I love each one of you for the person that you are. Mm-hmm. I don't love my kids. I love Chris, Kim, and Lindsay because they all are. Each one are very different from the other.
Yeah.
I think that I'm the person that I am today because you were given to us. Mm-hmm. And you showed me things about myself that I just never knew existed. And I think that, without going into any detail, that was something that I needed for my life. I feel very honored to be the mother of a handicapped child. Actually, I've always said, you're our daughter with a handicap, not our handicapped daughter.
Right.
Because I want everyone to see you first.
Yeah.
And not your handicap.
And that's how I've always felt about myself, too. Because that's how you raised me. You know, I wanted to be seen for Lindsay and not disabled Lindsay.
Exactly.
So, all right. Well, there's just a couple more things, or rather 3 more things that I want to go over in the child's perspective of a disabled child's perspective. Now, although I'm not a parent, I do know that parents' instincts are to fix and make better the difficulties that their children face, and whether that be physical, mental, or otherwise. But my advice to parents and the child's perspective is that you can make those things better if you can, but don't focus so hard on trying to fix your child that you don't get to know the child that you actually have.
Absolutely.
That's very important, because you're so focused on what could be better that you don't realize that your child is perfect the way that they are.
Exactly. I've always said you're the most perfect Lindsay I know.
Oh.
And that's just being that you are who you are. Mm-hmm. And your disability, I think, has played into your personality, but you've never gone on. I've never heard the words "why me" out of your mouth, ever.
No, I don't. I've never felt sorry for myself.
No,
I do have to say.
No.
But my parents had a wonderful balance of getting me surgeries and the physical therapy that I needed, but they also got to know me as a person, and they loved me the way that I was and the way that I am now. And although my surgeries did give me a better quality of life, those surgeries didn't shape me into the person that I am today, but rather my parents did. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to realize that you as a parent, if I do have parents listening, that you as a parent are the reason that your children grow up the way that they are. And you have to shape them into an independent and responsible adult. And so, although you want to make sure that they're safe, you also have to make sure that you're teaching them life skills.
Absolutely.
Also, you should take your child's lead. If they express themselves about certain aspects of their lives, such as, the many times that you advocated for me growing up with schools and things like that. And when I told you, and we'll get into this in another episode, but when I didn't want my child aid anymore at school to follow me around and help me do things, I told you that. And even though you were worried about it, you listened to me because I was a teenager and you knew that I knew what was best at that point.
Right.
So you should take your child's lead about certain aspects of their lives. You should listen and be mindful. Do what you think is best, while also bearing in mind that your child has feelings, wants, likes, and dislikes, just like any other child.
Absolutely.
And please don't ever tell your child that they can't be something just because they're disabled, like how I wanted to be a ballerina and a firefighter. No one ever told me that I couldn't be those things, but I can guarantee you that once your child grows up, they figure it out for themselves.
Absolutely, they sure do.
I am well aware that my physical limitations don't allow me to be a ballerina and a firefighter.
No.
You know, but we learned that. I learned that on my own.
Yes.
And I didn't need my parents squashing my dreams and telling their 6-7-year-old daughter that she couldn't be something that she wanted to be. But, you know, don't shelter your child from the world if they have a disability that will afford them the opportunity to live in the real world. The world is a cruel place, but we do learn how to live in it. You know,
Yes.
we are better for it.
Yes.
And so if you just let your child be treated as if they're, for a lack of a better term, normal. I think I'm normal, but
Yeah.
the world doesn't. You know, the world doesn't look at me and think, oh, she's normal. The world isn't accommodated for disabled people. It's
No.
just, that's the reality of it. So you can't treat your child as if they live in a disabled world, because they don't.
Exactly.
So that is all that I have today. And, you know, I'm aware that the tips that my mom and I have given you today might not work for every disability, and I understand that, and we can only speak about our experiences. And, you know, I'm aware that your situation may be different than mine, but that's just how we did it.
But overall, I think that you've given them some really good ideas.
I hope so. Please make sure to check out my mom's author website, and she writes under the name of Brita Adams, and that's Adams with 2 D's, and she can be found at britaadams.net, and that's BRITAADDAMS.net. And she's a great author of historical fiction. I quite like reading her things.
Thank you, dear.
You can also check me out on Twitter and Tumblr at Oh My Scars Pod, and on Facebook at Omar Scars. So there you have it, everyone. And I'd like to thank my wonderful mom again for joining me today and answering all of my questions.
I'm proud to be here, honey. I love you so much.
I love you. So I'll see you next time on another episode of Oh My Scars. Bye, everybody.